Hey everyone, and welcome back to Snipher Dev channel. Today we are starting our most requested project, building a real-time chat application using Django Channels and WebSockets. If you've ever wanted to add a live features like chat rooms, notifications, or live dashboards to your Django projects, this series is for you. In this first part, we are tackling the core foundation, setting up the ASGI server, configuring the routing, and creating our first WebSocket consumer to send and receive messages. So let's dive in. The first thing that we need to do in every project that you do in Django is to make sure that you have an isolated virtual environment for this specific project. So we are going to do exactly that, and in this video I'm going to use UV, and if you missed on how to install UV in your machine and use it to create and manage your virtual environment, I will leave the link to that video in this video description so that you can check it out and use UV. So the first thing that we need to do, let's create virtual environment. We will say, first of all, we need to initialize this directory. So we will say UV. Let's create virtual environment first. So it will be UV, V and V. Okay, hit enter. We have created virtual environment. Let's initialize this. We'll say UV, hit enter. And then now let's install some dependencies. Let's install some dependencies that we are going to use in this project. We install the packages that are needed. So we need channels for WebSocket handling and define the official ASGI server for Django. So we are going to say UV add Django channels and define. Hit enter. It has installed. Now let's create a Django project. So we'll say UV run Django admin start project. Then let's call this project config. And remember, I had this full stop at the end. This is to tell Django that create this project within the current directory we are in, which is YouTube. Let me clear this. As well, let's create our chat app. So we'll say UV run python manage.py start app, and let's call this app chat like that. Enter. So we have this chat. Once we have done that, we need to update our settings.py file. Let's go to config and have this settings.py file, and then we need to update our installed app. So we need to add chat and channels to the installed app. Okay, so let's add channels. Remember, we had installed channels, and then chat, which is our new chat app. And then the next thing that we need to do, we need to define the ASGI application path. Just below installed app list, we need to tell Django to use ASGI and where to find the routings. So to do that, we need to define this ASGI application equals to say config.sgi.application like that. So basically here we are defining our application path. So to give you some context on this, so by default, Django project uses this WSGI.py for server entry, but for WebSockets, we need to configure SGI. We need to configure this file. Okay. So to handle two types of connection, the first connection it should handle is HTTP connection for normal Django views, templates, etc. And then the second type of connection is to handle WebSocket connection for real-time data. Okay, so let's update this file. This file needs to import the routing middleware for channels. So we need to replace this content with some configurations to ensure that it handles two types of connections. So first of all, we need to import. Let's do some importation here. So below this, let's import. We need to import ProtocolTypeRouter. So I will explain what ProtocolTypeRouter does. So we'll say from channel routing import from channels, not channels, channels like that. Import ProtocolTypeRouter. We are as well need import URL router as well. Okay. We also need to import auth middleware stack. So we'll say from channels.routing import auth. From channels.routing import auth middleware. So from channels.auth import auth middleware stack. So this one, yes. Now let's do some configurations. We have this OS setting, the Django settings module, and then the next thing here we have this application get ASGI application. This is to get basic Django HTTP application. And then now let's configure our WebSocket type of connection. So we'll say application equals to, we are going to use ProtocolTypeRouter, that one, and then we will have HTTP, which will be handled by so we need to rename this. Let's rename this which will be handled by application, so it will be two types of application. So let's rename this so that we don't conflict with this. So let's rename this to Django SGI app. So this will handle basic Django HTTP application. So this will be Django SGI app. And then our second connection is WebSocket, which we will use auth middleware stack, and then we will have URL. We will tell Django where to find our URL routings for this. So we are telling Django to find the URL router inside our chat application, of which we haven't created these routings yet. Routing, we are going to create that file, and then WebSocket URL patterns. So we are going to create this. Okay. So a bit of an explanation what we have just created. So we have created a basic Django project, which is config, and we have created an app, which is chat. Okay, using Django admin start project and manage.py start app commands. And then the first key step that we have done is the installation. Since Django default is using WSGI for asynchronous HTTP, we needed to replace that with SGI standard for asynchronous support. We did this by installing channels. Remember, we installed channels using UV, so we can check that. So inside our PyPy project, you can see we installed channels. So the channels library and the Daphine, you can see Daphine library, which is Daphine server. Okay. Once we installed that, we went ahead into the settings file, and then we registered our new libraries, which is channel and our new app. And then the most importantly thing that we have done is we have told Django where to find our new asynchronous application entry point using this line here, SGI application. Okay, so this line replaces the traditional SGI settings. Okay, and then once we did that configuration, we jumped into sgi.py file, which is the new brain for our application. So we use ProtocolTypeRouter. Let me reduce the size of this. So we are using this protocol. We are using this ProtocolTypeRouter from channels to decide how to handle incoming traffic. Okay, so the traffic goes two ways. The HTTP we have here, the HTTP key handles or your regular views, API endpoints, and static files. That is just the standard Django application. And then we have the socket, WebSocket, this one. So we have the WebSocket key is new. So this is where we route all our WebSocket connections. We wrap it in auth middleware stack. This one we imported from channels. So this one to easily access the logged in user later, and then use URLRouter, this to map the path to our consumer. Okay, now we need to create the actual path mapping in our chat app. So inside our chat app, remember we are going to map this, so we need to create the routing inside our chat. Okay, so here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So we need to create a routing file inside our chat application. So here we'll say routing.py like that. And then, so this file will map our WebSocket URL path to our consumer class, which will handle the connections. So let's now create those paths. So we need to import a repath. So we'll say from Django.urls import a repath, and then we need to import some consumers. So we'll say from we haven't created consumers yet. We'll say from dot import consumers, and then let's create our WebSocket URL patterns. So we'll say WebSocket URL patterns equals to, this will be a list. So remember we had called these WebSocket URL patterns inside our ASGI. So this one, you remember this. So we need as well, we need to create the consumers. Okay, so the next thing that we need before defining our path, we need to create the consumers. So inside our chat app, we need to create a consumers file. Say consumers.ui that. So in this consumer file, so consumer file is the equivalent of Django view for our WebSocket connection. It defines how the connection is opened, closed, what happens when data is received. Okay, so we have created that. Now let's define our consumer. So we need to import JSON file, and then we need to say we need to import WebSocket. We need to import WebSocket consumer. So from channels dot generic dot WebSocket import WebSocket consumer. Okay, now let's define our chat consumer. So we'll say class chat consumer, and then we will use chat consumer, and then we will pass in WebSocket consumer. Now we need to connect. So we need to create a function that is called when the WebSocket is handshaked and accepted. So we'll say div connect. Okay, so let me remove this. Then we will say self. Okay, so this is called when the WebSocket is handshaked and accepted. Let's print something to our console. So we'll say print WebSocket connected, like that. And then we need to send an immediate message to the client for confirmation. So we'll say self.send. Then we need to say text data equals to, we need to dump the JSON. So we'll say JSON.dumps, and then find our message welcome. We'll say welcome, connection successful, like that. And then we need as well to define a function, a method. When called, a message is received from the client. This is called when the WebSocket closes. So we need to define a method that will be called when the WebSocket is closed. So we'll say div disconnected. Okay, disconnect. We have self, and then we have close code, and then we need to print something. So we'll say print, need to format it. So format it and say WebSocket disconnected, and then we pass in the code. So we'll say close. And lastly, we need as well to have a method that will be called when a message is received from the client. So we'll say div receive self, then we pass in text data, like that. And then we say text data, it will be a JSON. Then we load it. We say JSON.load. We load text data. So it will be text, not text. So text data, like that. And then we deliver the message. So we say message equals to text data JSON. This will be our, then let's print something. So we'll say print, we format it and say received message. Then we pass in the message, like that. Now we need to echo the received message back to the same client. So to do that, we'll say self.send, okay, and say text data equals to JSON.dumps, like that. And then we say message. So we format this and say you said, and then we echo that message back, say message, like that. So basically here we are echoing the received message back to the same client. So to do a recap, so we have just created the consumer. So in this consumer is where the magic happens. It is a Python class that lives for the entire duration of the WebSocket connection. Unlike the view, which just runs once, so we just created this consumer that lives for the entirety of the WebSocket connection. So first, what we did is we imported WebSocket consumer from channels. And then in our class chat consumer, we inherited WebSocket consumer. And in this inheritance, it needs 3 core methods. Okay, so we have the connect method, disconnect method, and receive method. Okay, so the first method was the connect method is called when the handshake is successful. So we call self.accept to officially open the connection. Then for the confirmation, we send a welcome message here. Send a welcome message back to the client as a JSON string. The second method, it is a disconnect method, is for basically this method is for the cleanup, which we'll use later. And then we have the third method, which is receive method. This one, receive method. So basically this is the listener. When the client sends data, it lands here. We decode it to JSON. So we have JSON, and for now we'll just echo the message back to the client to prove two-way communication works here. So we are echoing back here, back to the client. Now the next step that we need to do, we need to go back to our routing. Now we need to create this routing. Since we have created our consumer, we need to create that routing. Okay, so we need to map the path, okay, to the consumer. So here we will use repath, say RWS, say inside chat, then we call this room like that, and then we map it back to the consumer. So we'll say consumers chat consumer.sgi like that. So the next thing that we need, now let's create our front end and test the server. Now we create a simple HTTP file to test the WebSocket connection and run the fin server. So inside our chat, we need to create templates. So you say templates like that. And inside templates, we need to create another folder called chat. And inside the chat, we need to create room.html. Now let's create the directory structure we have created. And now we need to add HTML file with JavaScript to initiate the connection. So create the boilerplate, and here inside our title, let's have a title called that WebSocket test. And then we need to have inside our body now, let's have h1, which is a simple simple WebSocket test. And then let's have a text area. So this will be a text area. So the name here, we will have the ID. Let's have the ID to be the log. Let's have some rows. Say some rows. We want to have 10 rows. And then let's have some columns. So we'll say calls. Let's have around 50 columns. And then this is read only. Okay, let's break. Let's have a break like that. We close this so that we can see it properly. And then let's have an input, which is where we will type our message and send. So let's have input. So our input will be a type text. Let's give it a type ID. So it's ID equals to let's call it message input. And then let's have the size. So we'll say size. Let's give it 50 like that, and let's have a break. And then let's have a button now to send the message. So we'll say button, send message like that. And then let's give this button an ID. So we'll say ID equals to submit button. So once we have done that, let's run migrations first. UV run python manage.py migrate. Okay, we have migrated. Let's try to run the server. So uv run python manage.py run server. Okay, the server is running. Let's try to access that server. So let's say 127. Let me copy. Let's open that. Everything is working perfectly. So let's continue. Let me close the server now. Now we need to have our JavaScript. So we'll say script. Then inside the script, we need to establish the WebSocket connection first. So we'll say constant, say chat WebSocket, chat socket equals to new WebSocket. And then we have our let's start with W, and we have window.location ws.host. Okay, so we have ws. Now our URL router comes here, so it is ws chat, and then we have the room like that. So basically what we have done there is to establish a WebSocket connection, and then the second thing that we need to do is an event if the connection is opened. So we need to do that. So we'll say chat socket dot on open. So we need to check if the connection is opened. So we say function and say document dot get element by ID. We want to get the element by ID, and our element will be the logs. So we need to return something inside this text area to tell us whether the connection is opened. So we'll say log dot value plus equals to, so if the connection is opened, we will have something like status connected like that. And now the third thing that we need to do is we listen to the event where the message is received from the server. So to do that, we need to say chat socket dot on message equals to function e, then we open that and say const data equals to, this will be a JSON, and then we pass in the data, which is our message data like that. And then document, we as well need to show that message inside our logs. So document dot get. So when I say log, I mean inside our text area, because our text area is the one with the ID log. So document dot get element by ID. So we need to get the element by ID, and then our ID is log. Then we need to pass the value. We need to pass in the message. So data dot message like that as well. Let's have that. Okay, and now we need to return something in our log when the connection is closed. So we need to have chat socket dot on close equals to function e, and then we need to log something. So we'll say document dot get element by ID, not animation, get element by ID, and our ID is log dot value, and then we will have status returned. So we'll have status. If the WebSocket is disconnected, we need to return disconnected like that. And then the last part that we need to do is we need to have a way to handle the sent messages. So send message handler, this is document. So we'll say document dot get element by ID, and then the message we are getting the button. So the ID is submit button. So this is submit button. So we'll say submit button. Then on click, then we create a function. When you click that button, that is when you will send the message. So it will be function e, and then we'll have the input. So const, which is an input, we will get element by ID. So it will be document dot get element by ID, and our ID for the input, let's go back and check it. So our input element is message input. So we'll pass in that message input element ID. So message input, and then we have our message from there. So we'll say const message equals to input dot value. So we get that value that has been entered inside the input as our message, and then now we need to send the message as the JSON string. So we'll say chat socket dot send. Okay, so this will be a JSON dot string file, and then we'll say message will be message like that. And then we need to clear the input field after submitting the message. So we'll say input dot value equals to, we add an empty string. Okay, so this is basically to clear the input field. And now we need to create Django views. But before we create Django views, let me explain what we have just did. So we created the room.html file, and then we defined on how our template will look like. In our template, we have the text area, which will show the logs and the messages that will be exchanged. We have the input field, where we will type our message, and then we have the send message. So this button will send message as well. And then we have this script. First part is to ensure that the first function is to ensure that the WebSocket connection is successful, is to establish the WebSocket connection. The second one is to check if the WebSocket connection is opened. The third is to ensure that the message received from the user is an event. And then this one is to ensure we return something when the connection is closed. And then this function is the message handler. Basically, how to send the message. We have stringified. We send the message in form of a JSON string, and then we clear the input field. Now we need to create the Django view and the URL. So inside our chat application here, we need to go to the views here, and inside our views, we need to render this template. So we need to say div room. This will be a request, and then we need to return render request, and then our template is inside the chat room.html. Once we have done that, we need to map this URL path to this view. So we go back to our project URLs, these URLs here, and then we need to import that view here. So we'll say from chat.views import that, and then here we will have our path empty string, because that will be our home. Then we pass in our view, which is room, and then we give it a name. So we say name was to chat, okay, like that. And once we have done that, so basically what we have done, we needed the view to serve the page and a simple front end to test the connection in chat views. So that is why we have rendered this, or this should be chat like that. So correct that. So to render this template, so this is our view to render this template. Now for the JavaScript in our template, this JavaScript, the script that we wrote in our template, the key is in the line that creates the WebSocket. This is the key. So it uses the WS, okay, this is our protocol, and our path chat room, okay. So we define 3 listeners in our script. So we have on open, we have 3 listeners. Let me see those 3 listeners. So we have the first listener is this one on open, which logs the data we get back, and a click handler that uses chat socket.send to push our message to the server. So we have an open which confirms the connection. So this one confirms the connection, and then we have on message which logs the data we get back, and click handler that uses chat socket send. Then we have so finally we stop our old server. Since we configured SGI, we can simply run Dafin. So remember, we are using Dafin to run this, since we are using SGI to ensure that the connection is working. So to test this, we are going to use Dafin. So we say Dafin, then we give it a config. Remember, our SGI resides inside our config. Here is config SGI, so it will be config.sgi.application. So this is how we will run this. Okay, so if we open here, you can see the application that we want to run. Hit enter. Let's check it out. Did I not install Dafin? Let's check. I misspelled it. Yeah, we have Dafin here. Okay. I see the reason why. I haven't activated the virtual environment because I'm using UV. So I need to use UV run Dafin, then config.sgi ASGI.application. Hit enter. Okay, we have some problems here. So let's check it out. To have a space here. Application.host. Okay, we need as well to have these. I think I forgot to add these semicolons at the end of each event, and here as well. Okay, we also need here as well. Need here as well. So I think let's try again to run Dafin. Not enough values to unpack. Everything is okay. I think the issue is how I'm running the Dafin server. So let's do it again. So the issue is right here. It should not be the colon. It should not be the full stop. It should be the colon. So this is how you run it. You rerun dafin config.sgi, then colon application, hit enter, and you can see our server is listening on TCP address 127, that is localhost at port 8000. So let's go here and refresh this. So let's check the logs. Okay, it is not returning as expected. Let's refresh this. Okay, so you are able to see status connected, welcome, successfully. So if now I send a message, say hello, then click send, you'll be able to successfully. So this means that our WebSocket is working and it's successfully connected. So if I refresh, you can see it's successfully connected. Now on our script, on our terminal, you will be able to monitor how everything is being worked on. Okay, so here I've commented out these so that you can have a clear script. So we have the first one is to establish the WebSocket connection, and to check if the connection is opened, and then we have the message received from the server. And then we need to give something out if the connection is closed, and then we need to handle the message. Okay, and then the last one, we need to clear the input field. So I will leave the link to this repository where you can find the entire code up to this point in this video description. Okay, so basically here we have managed to ensure that there is our WebSocket is able to connect successfully. So, and that is it. You've successfully implemented your first two-way WebSocket connection with Django Channels. We went from a standard HTTP project to a real-time ASGI application. But right now, only you can see your message. In part 2, we are going to introduce the crucial concept of channel layers and groups to allow messages sent by one user to be broadcasted to everyone in the room. If this helped you, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Let me know in the comments if you ran into any issues, and I will see you in the next one.